So we really framed and built our ABM strategy around those growth objectives and those scenarios. And that goes back to the 3 R's: relationships, reputation, and revenue.
We can't take our foot off the gas. If we think we've cracked it, we haven't, because there's always going to be something new and better.
I think getting that sales and marketing alignment's key. If you haven't aligned with them of what your objectives are and who your accounts are, then I think fundamentally you will fail moving forward.
We all know that a lot of marketing tries to reach everyone, but we also all know that the best marketing is obsessively focused on targeting the right few. So joining us today is James Houselander, Director of Global ABM at HPE, who has more than 18 years experience in B2B marketing and a career built on targeting those few. So today he's joining us to share with us what it actually takes to make ABM work at scale. So welcome, James. Thanks for joining us today. And I think we should just jump straight in. So maybe tell us a little bit how you got into the ABM side of marketing. So obviously you've been in B2B marketing for a while, and sort of what that journey was like for you. What did you learn?
Yeah, so I suppose ABM's been around quite a while. I think I hear things like good marketing. ABM is good marketing, basically. And I suppose think about my last 10 years, I think go back 10 years in a role where I was in a UK marketing role. We'd actually just gone through trying to transition and change the perception of marketing within the organisation. And what sort of evolved in that time was we had a major accounts team that were really hunting after large deals. We were looking to try and land and expand in some of our top accounts. And we had some really key successes that we'd experienced there. And I think that's where I first sort of had a first foray into really testing what account-based marketing was. And the real challenge for me, being a single resource in a country trying to do multiple things across the marketing domain, it was really trying to find the time to do that. And I think it was also trying to have the agility and speed to get something into market that was really account driven. And I suppose the other challenge we faced was these account managers had multiple accounts. So it was really about how can we add value? And we tried and tested some approaches together with the sales organization over a period of time. And I suppose that was my first experience of doing true account-based marketing. And that's really evolved through a number of roles that I've had since then, both UK roles, moving into more of EMEA-based roles, and now in the role where I run global ABM at HPE, and really seen ABM work in different disguises and different ways across those organizations, and seeing different levels of success as well. And I think the opportunity that we had within HPE was we were doing good ABM in pockets, whether that was in regions, whether that was in BUs, or whether that was in sales, sometimes in sales as well. And it was about how do we drive a global consistency, and that's really where I've sort of specialised over the last year, purely on an ABM role, and really trying to deploy all the things I've learned across the years, taking best practice from the industry and also best practice from across what we're doing in HPE to really build upon those foundations that we have. So it's been a bit of a 10-year journey for me, I would say.
It sounds like it. And how did you balance? So just to go back to something you said right at the beginning there, you were trying to raise the reputation of marketing and within the organisation. How do you balance that against ABM? Because as we all know, ABM is often the first to be cut when people are looking at marketing costs versus ROI, because it's not easily measurable in the short term. So what sort of challenges did you experience there, and how did you make it work?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge I faced in that example I gave you was I was a single resource with a limited budget, with an objective to try and drive contribution from a pipeline perspective into the business. And I suppose when you're thinking about that more volume approach, that was where you got the quicker wins in terms of keeping that pipeline trickling in for the sales organization. So that was a big challenge. ROI is always a key thing across the business. It's a thorny topic, yeah. And I think that's something we're battling about with currently around how do we measure success. So it's not just about looking at pipeline, it's about looking at other metrics. So I think this is something I've learned in the last year. It's about looking at how do you drive account engagement, and how are you engaging the right people at the right time through their buying journey. And also for us, how do we find new buying groups? So that's one approach that we're taking. Secondly, how do we develop the reputation that we have within those accounts today, and how do we get known more broadly. And this is where we're trying to position our brand within HP into those top accounts that we're targeting. And the reason being is because we're not known for everything that we do today. So that then leads nicely on to how do we support the sales organization in terms of opening up new opportunities, whether that's into new parts of the portfolio, into new buying groups, or potentially helping them win opportunities through a deal-based approach. So that's really the challenge that we're throwing around, and it's not a quick exercise to go through. And I think our sales teams, and everywhere I've been, our sales organization is driven on quarterly and annual targets. So we're trying to think about this from a 3-year ambition. And I think that's probably where a lot of programs really struggle, especially when they're setting them up.
Because they're not given that space to be successful.
And I think about how you would have started your ABM journey in relation to, you got a limited budget, and of course what we always want to be is uber targeted and create those variations, which you probably didn't have the ability to do. Fast forward that on to today with the technologies that you have to create those variations, and as Charlotte said, target those buying groups. It's a sort of almost a completely different sort of way of going about it.
Yeah, I think if I go back to that 10 years ago, right, setting up an ABM program and actually getting started took a long time. It took a lot of budget. It took a lot of resource time, both from a sales and a marketing perspective. I think if you wind forward to today with the adoption of AI, in particular around how do you select your accounts, how do you build your insights in terms of who do you want to target, what do you want to target them with, and then how do you get some of those quick wins, i.e. how can you start to create some content fairly quickly that you can put into the hands of the sellers. Those things, I think, give you some tangible outcomes or some tangible things that our sales teams can get their hands on. And we've actually learned recently through some of the insights, it's helped them develop their account business plans. It's helped give them further insights. It's given them visibility into the organization or into individuals within those organizations that they didn't know. And that's been fairly quick within the first 3 months of us implementing our program. Historically, that could have taken months. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really helped with AI's also helped you because you haven't got to invest through external organizations to help you build those insights as well. So to your point, right, reduce cost, reduce time to get to market. So that's been hugely beneficial for us.
And also you can fail fast as well, so you can learn and see what's working and what isn't.
I think we've learned, we've actually removed some accounts because going through that exercise, we've realized they're not the right accounts for us to focus on from an ABM perspective. And we identified that within the first month or so. So
And how do you, because you talked earlier about KPIs and not just about pipeline revenue, but about other metrics. How does that go down with the rest of the business? Because obviously, Propolis, B2B marketing, they're always talking about the commercial marketeer and pivoting the language into that commercial flavour, if you like. How have you sort of gone about that in terms of showing the value of marketing, but still doing it in a way that's relevant to that language?
So we actually flipped this on its head a little bit when we were building our strategy, actually. And when we were going through the build of the strategy, we spoke to salespeople to understand what some of the key challenges were, how and where were they driving account-based growth, and then thirdly, what were some of the outcomes that they were trying to achieve. And what we basically boiled that down to there were 4 growth objectives that our business was going after, and that ranged from breaking into new accounts or breaking into new parts of the business right the way up to how can we ensure that a renewal we get across the line and we grow that opportunity. And then when you think about the scenarios that the sales organization are faced with, for us, it's about ensuring that we tell a 1HP story. So really positioning our brand and everything that we can do from within the technology and the portfolio that we have, right the way through to how do we go and break into new buying groups, or how do we demonstrate the value that the customer derives from the solutions that they've already got in place today. So we really framed and built our ABM strategy around those growth objectives and those scenarios, which then enabled us to set our metrics against how can we measure the success. And that goes back to the 3 R's, relationships, reputation, and revenue.
Yeah, no, that's really good because it is. I know it's a challenge that a lot of ABMers face, is because you've got this constant balance between what you want to measure as a marketeer because it works and that flicking those levers early on will deliver value later, but sometimes bringing the organisation on that journey can be quite tricky.
And I think it also goes back to your accounts that you select as well, because we originally started looking at, well, how do we identify some net new logos to go after? But actually the biggest growth to the business was going to come from some of our large existing accounts that we had today. So we really started with a data-driven approach, looking at not just what revenue they do for us today, but where does that come from across our portfolio? Because we're a fairly extensive, complex business in terms of the solutions and the technology that we offer. And then we also mapped that onto, well, what's the addressable market opportunity for that customer? So we really looked at where our share of wallet was today. And that's, again, another measure of success. How do we grow our share of wallet into those accounts? And that, again, is a long-term metric that we will look at over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years and beyond.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of questions, sorry, and I'm thinking and talking at the same time, which is never a great combo. So what do you think, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here, are the biggest 3 lessons that you've learnt from making this transition, and particularly to where you are today with a global role, and obviously having to scale out all of that, because all of that is great, but when you're suddenly looking at 8 geographies, for example, where do you even begin? So what are some of the lessons you've learnt there?
So I think the first thing is having a strong strategy. That's something that we embarked on this journey just over a year ago in HPE to drive a global ABM strategy with consistency and starting to talk a common language, to select our accounts in a common way, to communicate what we were doing and how we were doing that across the business. So number 1 was strategy. And we actually brought in a ABM consultant inflection group to help us diagnose where we were, but also then work with us to build our strategy that we now implemented. The second one was then getting key stakeholders on board. And that was from both the sales and the marketing side. So we basically took this to our GOMDs to get their buy-in. We then cascaded right the way down through their sales management, where we were getting their buy-in not only to the strategy, but also sharing the data and the insights that we'd got in terms of the accounts that we believed were the best fit for an ABM program within their geo. And then I suppose the third part of it then is to communicate that. And part of the communication piece is two-way, because we're going to rely on the broader marketing ecosystem within HPE to help us activate our programs. So it's really going and getting the buy-in of our different marketing parts of the marketing organization, right the way from our brand, our customer advocacy, our digital and campaigns and content teams, and also our operations team have helped us extensively in both building the data to help us select the accounts right the way through to how we measure it. So it's really bringing together all of the silos across the organization. And then lastly, I think the other thing we've learned that's linked to that is bringing in other parts of the business as well. So we've now got advocates across our sales and strategy planning team, where they're using our insights to enhance the business planning process that the account teams are going through. And now that's evolving into how do we then scale our program up in the future, because they will help us identify who those global accounts are that we want to put into as part of our program. And that's work in progress for us. Strategy, communications are key, really.
Yeah, I like that. And I particularly like that bit about giving other teams the insights, because it speaks to that consistency of approach, doesn't it, that you were talking about earlier. But it also, I guess, makes it smooths the road for that cross-silo working. When you're giving them something, you're not just saying, right, I need you to participate in this program.
Yeah, and I think especially because buying groups have become so much more expanded and complicated, to have as much intelligence from multiple people to help direct you how to engage with those buying groups must be essential.
Yeah, it's key. I think there's a whole load of knowledge that our account teams have today, but there's also a whole load of knowledge they don't have today. And that's where using AI and using third-party research houses that have enhanced our insight packs, we've understood who those personas, who those buyers are, but then focusing in on which of those buyers and which of those individual stakeholders we want to go after, and then getting really granular into understanding that stakeholder. And that's where we are now. We're building a plan around how do we activate the key stakeholders within those target accounts, which is supporting the whole growth objective of the client team, which is to get wider, deeper and higher up in their accounts.
Yeah, and as we see, and if you engage with your buyers more directly, they get more self-consensus. They're talking to each other, where you don't always have to be always chucking things into them or marketing them aggressively, so they can sort of self-communicate your proposition, the value of what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that to that point, actually, what we're not doing, or what we are doing, sorry, is working much closer together with our digital team, because these accounts are being targeted through our digital programs. So we're really taking and gleaning all of the intelligence we can around what are they engaging with, how are they engaging with us, and then optimizing that through a very targeted account-based approach that we're building.
And what you do
team.
next after that.
And what you do next.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where I guess a lot of that cross silo working has the really big impact going forward. Is you can work to a point where you can make the results of the ABM program a lot more predictable, because you're constantly looking at, okay, what are the leading indicators across all of this different activity and types of accounts that are engaging, and when it doesn't work, because I always think a lack of results is just as insightful as a big set of great results, because you can use that insight, but just in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so if we go back to 10 years ago, what are some of the things that you wish you'd known then that you've learned over the last 10 years?
That's a great question. So lots, I think, really. I think in that 10-year period, I wouldn't say there's one thing that's really landed upon me. I think it's a combination of a number of moments. I think, like we all know, going to B2B marketing events, whether that's through B2B's Propolis community, whether that's going out to any other industry event designed for B2B marketers, ABM's been a topic on those agendas.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's been an event dedicated to ABM. And like I said at the start, I think it's learning what others are doing. I think organizations very similar to ourselves with peers in the network, they've been adopting and doing ABM for years, right? They've scaled programs, they've redesigned programs, they've actually moved back from ABM to more traditional field. People call ABM different things. I think we debated, do we call it ABM?
Yeah.
And we went round and round in circles. Some people call it growth marketing, customer-led marketing, whatever it is. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned, is that is really connecting with the network of my peers out in the industry that have done it over that period of time.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that really lands true was probably this time last year for me, when my leadership in the organization we were looking at, like I said, how do we consolidate what we did around ABM and had a bit more of a clearer strategy. That was the goal. And part of the reason for that was, one, the opportunity that we had to support the growth of the business, and we saw that opportunity to be very targeted into a small set of accounts. The second part of it was also partly changing the perception of marketing within the organization. And I think when I was going out doing my research around what does good ABM look like, taking all those years of learning, being out at those events, talking and having a bit of experiment around with things, one thing landed with an ex-colleague, actually, when I said, what would you do if you redesigned your ABM strategy, or you were building your ABM strategy? And he said, it is about going and getting independent advice around someone who's advised other organizations similar to you. And that's where we arrived at doing that exercise, which was working with Inflection to build our strategy. So that's the one thing that for me was the big pivot a year ago, and it helped us really focus how and what we were going to base our ABM strategy and HP around.
It's that constant learning, I think, and I would say that I was having a conversation with somebody about it today, especially right now with all the different tools and approaches, because everybody's got a lot more technology available to them. So what is working, and that's that constantly looking at case studies, hearing what people have to say, as you rightly said, go to the events, get inspired, what's right for us. And I think that's only going to get, or it's going to accelerate even more. So we can't take our foot off the gas. If we think we've cracked it, we haven't, because there's always going to be something new and better.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was actually last week at the European ABM conference in Amsterdam, and you always walk away with 2 or 3 really useful nuggets, whether it's someone that's using AI or someone that's completely redesigned how they do ABM. There was one that it was a lady presenting around some of the common questions that she gets asked by sales and how you think you should ask them versus how you should actually answer them. And it was really interesting because they were really basic things, but it's all about the language that you talk around otherwise you lose the ability for sales to see the value of what you're doing. So
Totally.
I think it's really important to constantly learn, as you said, and understand what others are doing, whether it's really basic or fairly complex things that you could potentially go and utilize and leverage into your business.
And what are some of the challenges that you've bumped into over the years, and sort of what are your maybe just pick a couple, and what are your approaches to overcoming those challenges?
I think the first one is sales buy-in. I think getting that sales and marketing alignment's key. If you haven't aligned with them on agreement of what your objectives are and who your accounts are, then I think fundamentally you will fail moving forward. So sales and marketing alignment, I've seen that all the time, good and bad.
Hear it all the time.
Hear it all the time.
Totally.
The second one I think is around resources, so dedicated resources. We've made the plan to implement dedicated resources. They're just purely responsible for ABM onto 3 or 4 accounts, or maybe a segment of accounts. I think when you try and wear multiple hats, that's a real challenge, because your time gets diluted. You're not focused on what you're trying to achieve. So I think those two things are key: sales and marketing alignment, and having dedicated resources if you're deploying a pure ABM program.
And how have you? What are your go-to tactics for sales and marketing alignment?
Wow, tactics aligned sales and marketing. So I think one, it's building that relationship and rapport, and I think to do that, you need to start with a data-driven approach. And that's exactly what we did. So we started, we talked about the theory around why ABM. We quantified that with some stats around other organizations. What did they see in terms of success? But also looking at data in terms of these are why we believe the accounts are to be selected.
Yeah.
So that then gives you that credibility and trust with sales, that you know what you're talking about, you've thought this through.
Yeah.
And I think that's really helped us to get that buy-in right the way down through our sales organization.
It's that objectivity, isn't it?
Yeah. Now it's about delivering results.
Yeah. Definitely.
Right, James, we're going to put you under the hot seat now, or into the hot seat. So it's a new segment for us, but we have 3 quick fire questions. So we're going to ask these in rapid succession and want to get your immediate answer to these. So don't think about it too much. It's openness and honesty. See how we go. So what's the one metric that actually tells you if your ABM is working?
I think there's multiple metrics, but the one metric is account growth for me. I think if you deploy a ABM program properly, then you should see growth within those accounts that you're targeting.
Excellent. And let me ask the question just after that. So is that net new, or are you looking at it more from cross-sell, upsell, or both?
So both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Next question. Ready? The biggest ABM failure mode isn't strategy. It's sales and marketing not talking. True or false?
True. I think if sales and marketing aren't talking right from the start, then you don't get that buy-in, you don't get that commitment. And that conversation and partnership has to run throughout your whole program, right the way through to your execution, your activation, and even the measurement of your success.
Fantastic. And the final one. So if ABM programs were honest about their results, how many would actually survive?
I think a lot of them would survive, because I think if you do it properly and you do exactly what we just said around sales marketing alignment, and you've got clear objectives, then you should be able to measure the impact that's made. If you can't measure that impact, then you make the decision to remove that account from your program.
Thank you, James. Well, that's great. And I hope you've enjoyed being with us today.
I have. It's been fantastic.
Hopefully we haven't put you under too much pressure.
No.
I have to say a lot of your answers actually follow the same sort of suit of thinking that we're from. So there was nothing there. It was just nice to hear a sort of a reaffirmation of thinking, I have to say. And hopefully that was good for you as well.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me. It's great to share some of the experience.
Fantastic.
Lovely.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
James.